that he's facilitating off of fetch lands and underground seas. To Phantasmal Image. Now that's a card that sort of picked up some steam in Merfolk recently, both because it kind of naturally fits in the deck, because you have so many Lords and Silver Gill Adept. You have a bunch of good targets of your own to copy. Also, since you have Vial on two, it's another 2-drop that you can just keep sliding in under Vial.
Correct.
And it also gives you, it does a lot of work against Reanimator decks.
Correct.
Like you can clone Legends and get Gristle Brands and that sort of thing off the table. So Phantasmal Image is something that's kind of picked up steam in these Merfolk decks in recent months.
Looking at Jason's deck list here, Blue-White Miracles. Pretty standard stuff here. The only real differences that you're going to find, or maybe things that stand out to you, 4 Terminus is a lot higher than most of the lists playing.
Yeah, although Joe earlier had 4.
Did Joe have 4 as well? Okay. I normally see that card as a 2 to 3 of, but if 4 is becoming standard, I do apologize. We're also going to find 2 Relic of Progenitus in here, an Engineered Explosives with a small Trinket Mage package. Those guys are going to be a part of it. I'm looking to see if there's any artifact lands to search for, which there are not. And of course, Trinket Mage can search for one of his 4 Sensei's Divining Tops. And then the other card that you're going to find here, I think this is a Joe Lissette special, 2 Portent.
Oh yeah, he had 1.
He had 1. Okay, so Jason has opted to add a second one to his deck. Now, because you are the old man in the booth, I would like you to recite what Portent does for our audience.
Ugh, I'm trying to think. I believe it is Portent first.
Portent. P-O-R-T-E-N-T, the cod.
I think that I'm going to get this wrong, but I think what the card is look at the top card of either player's deck.
Okay.
You can mill it over, keep it there, and you draw a card at the beginning of the next upkeep. But I think I got that wrong. I know it's one of the slow trips, like the old...
It is one of the slow trips.
I think, if I remember correctly, it's look at the top of either player's deck and you can keep or mill.
Okay.
But I suspect I got that wrong.
It's old school. We're going to bring it up on the screen at the beginning of this match, but it is old school.
Yes. An Ice Age special.
Now, I think typically this matchup is one that favors Ian Kendall. Island Walk, efficient beaters, plus timely counter magic. Basically what fish style decks look to accomplish versus a much slower deck that, once it gets established here in Blue-White Miracles, is difficult to beat, but can he get established in time, as Jason's going to take a mulligan here?
I'm going down to 5 cards. Well, I think that, previous to Avacyn Restored, look at the top 3 cards of target player's library, shuffle them, or... Okay, so yeah, I was off.
How dare you?
So it's sort of a bootleg Ponder.
It's the art, though. What's going on there?
Some sort of Balduvian shaman guy is having some sort of vision, or he has some piece of crappy art hanging up on his wall, and there's a smoke machine in the background. I think he's having a vision.
Of the 2 options of vision or smoke monster in the background, I'm gonna go with the vision as well.
Dang.
That rug really ties the room together.
So, so I'm pretty sure, previous to Avacyn Restored, matchups like Counterbalance versus Merfolk were very, very favorable for Merfolk.
Yes.
I would suspect that's still the case, but I think Terminus does a lot to shift the matchup.
Changes a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's a full Wrath of God that is easy to push through Dazes and Pierces because of the casting cost.
Yeah.
So that's a big game changer.
If it was just your standard Wrath of God, then it makes Curse Catcher, Daze, Spell Pierce, like those cards much better. But for 1 mana,
yeah, you can push it. You can push it through.
As we are going to see Aether Vial for Ian Kendall.
And he also has Wasteland in his hand, so this might be a pretty short game. We have some dice on the top of the deck to make sure that Ian doesn't forget to put counters on his vial.
We're going to see a brainstorming response here from Jason. Now, some people may call that tactic Bush League by putting a die on top of the deck, but I'm all in favor of it. If it's going to make sure that he doesn't forget his vials, then by all means, whatever it takes to make sure that, it's legal in the game.
Yep.
If that's what you need to do to make sure you don't forget a vial, I'd say go for it.
Right. Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm glad, I played a lot competitively like 10 years ago where stuff like that was just kind of generally not cool. DCI just had different rules about that sort of stuff, but I think, generally speaking, just let people remember the stuff and let the game be determined by like the actual decisions people are making, not whether or not they're forgetting stuff like putting a counter on the Aether Vial to be what matters.
As we're going to see, Sensei's dividing top here from Jason along with the Tundra, so we'll see how backbreaking that Wasteland was.
Well, he has a second Wasteland, so...
Well, then that's a good card, is the thing about Wasteland. And he didn't have a fetch land. He didn't have a fetch land to clear the Brainstorm, so he is kind of Brainstorm locked, if you will. But the top is going to be able to likely get him out of this.
Yeah.
Now, the issue here for Jason is we see a Swords of Plowshares in his hand, along with the Counterbalance. But the Swords of Plowshares is something he can cast right now. So this Lord of Atlantis that Ian is likely to violin is going to be able to get some beatdowns on.
Yeah, and this is sort of a... It happens actually so much that it's almost taken for granted, or people forget about it. But this is just another, like... When you have Wasteland in your deck, you get to win, like, kind of 10% of your games, roughly, just for free.
Yeah, just like drawing two, blowing up two
Right.
other lands, and they're just like, yep, I can't do anything. And he's going to leave the Vial at 2.
Yep. This is the again the upside of having Phantasmal Image to replace one of the 3-drop lords. Is
Yeah.
now your Vial can just stay at 2.
And we're going to see a Curse Catcher put into play here. And a Vial is going to copy our friend Mr. Lord of Atlantis, and in for 3 we go.
Yep. This is about as well as you can script a game from the Merfolk side of things.
Yes.
I think he also has Force of Will left over, plus play to Mutavault, so can't ask for much more than this.
As far as being on the play and, you know, being in this particular matchup, I don't know if the start really gets any better.
Yeah.
We're going to see a Counterbalance put into play with an Underground Sea and not a Tundra. So still Swords of Plowshares is off right now for Jason.
And Ian has Force of Will in his hand, but I'm not even sure he cares. I think he's debating about whether he cares about this at all. Vial, again, for people who are not Legacy experts, Vial, Counterbalance is not triggered off of Vial. Vial puts things into play, it doesn't cast them.
Correct.
So that doesn't prohibit any of his development as far as the Aether Vial is concerned.
And Ian's just going to let the Counterbalance resolve because, again, it's not having much of an effect on this game. Now, he is going to move his Vial up to 3 because he does have a Marrow Reejerey in his hand as he draws a Dismember for the turn. So he's likely going to Vial in the Reejerey, activate the Mutavault, and push in for a ton of damage.
Yeah. This is a beating.
That's going to be in for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
All right.
More than 9.
We'll call it a game.
More than 9. All right, tap out.
Yep.
So Ian Kendall, does it surprise anyone that he was Legacy Champion now? And draws like that? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Sure. A bunch of Wastelands, Aether Vial. I mean, when you have Aether Vial, Island, Wasteland, Mutavault, 3 creatures, it's like, you can't ask for, it's about as good as it gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, with the force backup too. Like,
Yeah, sure, whatever, just in case.
yeah, just a fantastic draw, especially in this matchup. Now, the question is, what can Jason do to kind of counteract? I mean, a draw like that is not going to be something that's
Right.
reasonable to beat, but looking at his sideboard, the big one here is Lawan Cephalid Empress,
Oh, he came ready.
which is a spicer if I've ever seen one.
That was popular a couple years back when the Merfolk Mirror was a bigger thing. I know in the SCG Open Series, like, you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Merfolk was the deck, and Lawans were all over the place, but sort of fell out of flavor.
He also has 3 Path to Exiles in his sideboard. He has a Humility, which I don't know your opinion on that. I don't love it.
I mean, he's got to have cards in his deck that are worse, right?
I mean, most
Like,
likely.
humility isn't like an ace or anything, but it's got to be better than other stuff in there. Like
the Relic of Progenitus, for example.
For example, yes.
An Engineer...
Or like Spell Pierce is not great here, like...
Sure.
Yeah.
Engineer Explosives is something he can Trinket Mage for. Explosives on 2 is going to blow up a lot of the Lords. Vendilion Click isn't really where he wants to be. Disenchant potentially to take care of Aether Vial, but I don't really love that way of fighting that particular card.
Right, it's you're asking for the pieces to interlock too specifically for like that to happen and be good. I think when you're in the Miracles position, you'd rather just try to like go over the top instead of trying to fight them 1-for-1 or answer their card situationally. I think you just want to have broad, sweeping answers to the stuff that's going on. So you want more Wrath of God effects. Things like Lawan and Humility that clean up everything are great. I think Disenchant to answer Aether Vial is asking for a lot to go right for that to happen.
Sure. And that's pretty much it. Now, Ian's side.
He has a Kira Great Glass Spinner, which can offer protection against plows and paths. He has 2 copies of Pithing Needle if he wants to try to break up Counterbalance, although I'm not sure how much he cares about Divining Top. And that is really It of note.
The needles are an interesting way to stop or kind of. I don't want to use the word stop because it feels kind of definite, but it's a way to fight against Terminus plus Sensei's Divining Top.
Yep.
It's not the greatest way, but it is a way to go about doing that.
Also an answer to Jace. I mean, it has, not that Jace is like the best card against Merfolk, but it's just another thing. Like, and he doesn't have a lot in the way of cards that are bad here. I mean, I think he wants to lose the Dismember. I think he wants to lose the Sower of Temptation. But everything else in his deck, I mean, it's a Merfolk deck. It's pretty straightforward, streamlined. Yeah. You know, it is what it is.
He could shave out a couple Phantasmal Images potentially, but yeah, I mean, there isn't a ton that he wants to sideboard out.
Right. I like the Merfolk of cross out on the deck list, replaced with Master of the Pearl Trident.
Yes,
that is a mistake. Yes,
common mistake. It is the Master of the Pearl Trident.
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing with his friends.
I think there should be some sort of like achievement bonus if you have Master plus Merfolk in play at the same time, like something. They should become a greater sum, you know, than just a 2/2 Island Walker.
Oh, sure. Kind of like Brothers Yamazaki when both are in play.
Right. Basically, I just want an excuse to go get a playset of, like, beta Merfolk of the Pearl Tridents, cut the Curse Catchers from this deck, and just go back to our roots. I'm just looking for any excuse to make that a thing.
I will keep that in mind for the next 5 seconds.
Okay.
That's it. As both players are shuffling up here, they both have the same sleeves. Those are like my favorite sleeves too. Baby blue. Baby blue. For his Merfolk deck. It's kind of like a theme. Swimming through the water. No? Okay.
I used to be into like, you know, sort of the pink Dragon Shield sleeves, and now I'm just more into like whichever ones I receive for free. That's sort of my those happen to be my favorite sleeves.
As Ian is going to keep his opening hand. Now he only has a Mutavault in his hand. Or, excuse me, a Scalding Tarn.
Yeah, but he has an Aether Vial.
And he has an Aether Vial. However, if this does not resolve, he doesn't have a second land to play.
Yep.
So he's kind of all in on this Aether Vial resolving?
This is a very common situation, I believe, for Merfolk to be in.
And there she is. This is the public enemy number 1.
This is a challenging card to beat if your deck is a blue creature deck.
Which I believe, checking the deck list, yes, that's what Ian is playing.
All your creatures go away, and then you can't play them. That is not the easiest thing to beat.
Now, the only way for him to beat that is an Aether Vial, as we're going to see a response, sacrifice included Delta, potentially could be a Spell Pierce or something of that nature.
Yep. He could, he has his one Dismember, and then he has Vial as the ways to get out.
And I would be surprised if he left his one Dismember in.
Yeah, because a lot, like, you can reasonably expect Lawan to be in some Merfolk sideboards, but it's not really in these kind of decks.
And we're going to see a Brainstorm response, so potentially digging for a Force of Will, as we see a Daze.
Yeah. I don't think you daze this, because if he's digging for Force of Will, it's so much better to daze that.
To daze the Force of Will, yeah. Well, we are going to see a Daze here on this.
Okay.
I mean, dazing a Brainstorm isn't the worst, of course.
Sure. I guess if you also don't have a second land, like you'd rather daze your one land when you don't have another land drop to make, because then it's sort of a free roll. Like you weren't going to make a second land drop anyway.
Yeah.
So that makes some sense too.
And so we saw that as we're going to see a Portent, and of course, it won't be the first time for Jason's opponents to take a look at that one.
Dusting off some of the classics.
So Portent is going to target himself. He's going to take a look and set some things up here. There's an Entreat the Angels along with the Swords of the Plowshares, and what looks to be a land as well.
So the term of Portent in these decks, like why would you play this over Ponder, is actually the slow trip nature of it. Like you get to, if there's a Miracle card on top, you get to draw the card on their turn, and then trigger your Terminus or your
Entreat the Angels,
which Ponder cannot do.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, it's interesting. It's like very backwards or whatever, but it's like really interesting.
The fact that you do not draw the card right away is the reason to play it.
And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about Legacy. Yeah. It's like, you know, that's not like an option in Standard. Not to say that that's a fault of Standard, but it's just like if you go deep into the deck building tank, and you have like this Blue-Eyed Miracles deck, and you're like, man, I'd like need this effect. I need like a certain effect to do something. Like, does this card exist? Legacy's like, yeah, I have that card.
Yep. Although if I had Portent in my deck, I would not be able to resist the urge to just ding my opponent with it. I would just want to go upstairs.
So that's the difference. That's the difference between you and them.
I want to check it out. What's going on over there?
I want to control that draw step.
All right, so he's going to replay his island and tick his Vial up to 1 there. And no end of no end of fishes in Ian's hand over here.
So we're just going to see
Completely
an island
loaded.
go here.
Doing a little bit better of protecting himself against Wasteland this game, which Ian does have in his hand.
And he draws an Underground Sea, which he's likely going to play. I would guess he's going to play that and not show the Wasteland yet.
Yes. So the question is, like, what does he want to violin, and then what does he want to hard cast?
Correct. And he does have a bevy of options in his hand for how he wants to craft this game, or at least these opening turns of the game. He's going to hardcast a Silvergill Adept, revealing Korahel Commander.
And I mean,
that one did resolve.
Yep.
And he drew a Force of Will off of the Silvergill Adept. So a rather good draw, I would say.
Yeah.
So we'll see island number 3 here. And
We're gonna try to resolve a Trinket Mage. I assume if this resolves, we're gonna go looking for engineered explosives.
Explosives or Sensitive Divine top, either one.
Yep. It's got a Pithing Needle.
Pithing Needle as well. I did not. Oh yeah, I brought that up. That was on the sideboard. So
Okay.
he's going to search for a Pithing Needle just to shut off that vial.
Yep. Yeah, once he's actually making Ian actually just play semi-honest with his mana, then cards like Terminus and your Engineer Explosives become a lot better. Like,
Yeah. And in turn, the Merfolk deck becomes a lot more fair.
Yeah, oh yeah. Merfolk deck, when it's just kind of casting its creatures honestly, is a very beatable deck. When it's doing all this kind of stuff is when it's at its most powerful.
Agreed. As we're going to see another vial, our first vial activation, putting our Silvergill deck into play.
Don't know what we're thinking about here.
Jason has stopped on the end step because he may potentially Swords to Plowshares one of these Silvergill Adepts. And likely to search for a basic plains, but could potentially search for a Tundra as well, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think that he's good on blue mana, so I would assume that he would just want to find a plains here. Yeah, we're going to try to land a plow. That's going to go.
Yeah, and that's one that doesn't really seem worth fighting over, especially when Ian knows that Jason has Pithing Needle in his hand.
Yes. I mean, again, obviously Ian's off to a very good start in this game, but Jason's doing a much better job of keeping his head above the water. He might actually be able to get in a position to start resolving some of his more powerful spells.
As Ian opts to leave his Aether Vial at 2 counters. Between the beginning of this game and the turns that have led, Ian has drawn 2 Force of Wills, so he can fight over things if he needs to.
Which is going to be really important once that Pithing Needle comes down. Like, he might want to fight over that anyway, but if he doesn't, then Lawan suddenly becomes much more dangerous.
Yes. And Kendall is going to looks like he's going to be casting a Marrow Regery.
The Regery is in. I assume it's in.
He's going to activate this here. We're going to see a Phantasmal Image. Both things that he can copy are rather good.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this argument's both ways. There is something to be said for getting your Silvergill Adept up to a 4/3 to be able to attack into the Trinket Mage this turn.
Yep, and that's what it looks like he's done. Basically making Trinket Mage in a completely irrelevant body until one of those lords is taken care of. So we're going to see an untap. We're going to see a draw, a quick draw. You gotta be careful how you draw when you have Terminus in your deck.
You gotta treat Terminus, man. You gotta slow down. You gotta savor the moment.
That's true. That's true. Because if that was a Terminus, that would be relatively awkward.
A heartbreaker.
Yeah. So we're gonna see a Pithing Needle here.
I assume at this point that Kendall's gonna let this go because he's kind of running out of guys, and the vial's already kind of done its work.
Do you think he's past the point where vial doesn't really do much now?
And he's got to suspect that there's got more important things to potentially fight over as well.
As you said, Terminus, Lawan, I mean,
He
I don't
could
think
have
the
a
Jace
card-
is in his deck,
right,
but
but
Entreat the Angels.
Yeah, he could have a card like Humility or Moat. I mean, there's stuff.
Yeah.
You got to suspect he's got some big cards.
All right, so we'll see what Ian drew and how he wants to craft out this turn.
I mean, I have to assume that he's going to want to try to tap the Trinket Mage before combat because he does run a pretty big risk if he just sends in, because the Phantasmal Image can be killed by any number of things.
Sure.
That I think that you wouldn't want to run the risk here.
He's just going to like to shove in.
All right. It's going to block. It looks like the Regery
Is this the swords here?
or something.
Snapcaster Mage or something of that nature?
Yeah, if he doesn't have another Lord at the ready for his Vial, yeah, that was a pretty gutsy attack. And I was actually thinking that last turn I would have imaged the Adept, because the odds that something like this happens are so high that I'd rather just cantrip again than like the only way that attack that sequence is awesome for you is if Jason has basically nothing in his hands, and at that point, you win the game comfortably anyway with your clock plus your 2 Force of Wills.
Sure.
So
We're going to see a Phantasmal Image here being cast. Copying the Silver Adept, getting us 1 card deeper into our deck. Now we know that Jason's hand is basically just Terminus, land, and now he just draws another Swords to Plowshares. He's just going to pass back, actually opting not to play the 6th land.
yep.
Well, the 6th land, of course, is a Tundra, which would get wastelanded, so I'm okay with him just holding that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So in for 4 we go. And we're going to have Swords of Plowshares targeting Phantasmal Image, so no life gain for Ian,
Yep.
but 2 damage is still going to happen. And now we're going to see Coral Helm Commander. And we're going to
We'll level him twice.
pump it up. I think that was the 3rd Swords he just
Yep.
drew. Okay.
Pretty hard to run pretty tough to run the Merfolk deck out of guys, especially after he's cantripped this many times.
And we're going to see a Termini.
I assume this is going to be met with a Force of Will, unless he's got Days in his hand.
Unless he has Days hiding, which he does.
Yeah.
A pretty good Days. That was pretty good Days.
If I was Jason, I would be like, you gotta be kidding me, man. It took you that long?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I might find a better spot for this Days than his Terminus with me presenting lethal.
He's gonna
Could happen.
He's gonna blow up that land. We're going to make Coral Helm a little bit bigger, which in turn is gonna make Silver go a little bit bigger.
Bang.
And in we go. I believe that attack is going to knock Jason down to 2.
We got 2 Force of Wills at the ready here.
2 Force Wills and 2 blue cards. Whew.
Curse Catchers, I think. Yeah.
I think Ian did just fine. These 2 games, just fine.
Yeah, that's not bad.
We're gonna see a Jace the Mind Sculptor, and he's gonna say
No.
no, sir. And that's
There
gonna do
is.
it. Ian Kendall, Star City Games, Legacy Open champion in Seattle.
That was
moving on to 4-0.
Pretty efficient evisceration of